One person liked my hair, Jordan, but thanks.
Oh my Lord.
The only person that counts, though. Oh.
All right, welcome everybody to a Common Sense reading series. Featuring this afternoon's readers, Sommer Browning, Gion Davis, and Amish Trivedi. For those of you who are attending for the first time, I'm Jordan Stempelman. I've run this series. I started this series back in 2011, and this will be the last reading of the fall. In the spring, all the readings except for the one in January, which features our creative writing double majors at the Art Institute, the Kansas City Art Institute. All the rest of those readings will be virtual. And the readings for the spring will include, let's see, Sandra Simons, Maureen Thorsten, Justin Marks, Camden Hilliard, Mona Kareem, Joseph Bradshaw, Emily Kendall Fry, and Sylvia Jones. I've archived past readings at my website. Let me go ahead and put that into the chat for you all so you can see it. Let's see if I can get rid of this, close. There you go. There's the archive. And in the next couple of days, this reading will also be archived there as well. Before I introduce this afternoon's lineup, please feel free to use any of the reaction emojis at any point, post any questions you have during or immediately following the reading. If there are any questions for the writers, I'll go ahead and field those. And if the writers have any questions for one another, they can ask those as well. So our first reader tonight will be Amish Trivedi. I've known Amish for a long time. We met each other years ago at the Iowa City Library. Before that, I was an admirer of his. Amish was really, he championed the poet Joseph Charavelo's work when Joseph Charavelo was kind of forgotten, unfortunately, for a while. And so that was something that really drew me to Amish. And then just knowing him, he's just such a wonderful human being. Amish is the author of 3 books, most recently Future Panic. He has poems, it has had poems in the American Poetry Review, Bennington Review, Brooklyn Rail. He has an MFA from Brown and a PhD from Illinois State. He is currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Delaware. And please welcome Amish.
Thank you, Jordan. I am pulling this out. Do you see this? This is still your note. I still have it. Jordan left me this note in my office. I was out on a break or something. Who knows what I was doing? Goofing off, no doubt. Jordan left me this note and I still have it. This is from 2007. So what is that? 15 years? Yeah, still have it. It is in my desk at all times. So thank you, Jordan, for the introduction, for the invite, and coming to find me that day still, and ever since. I'm going to read some poems from Future Panic and then a couple of new poems. Crisis is stop time, oxon. Parts move and replicate without propulsion. The clanking replicator, artificial self, remainder of misprision from long before. If you can see me, I can see you too. Listen, I speak as clearly as I can. The silence is unnecessary, as is action. We are the oxon of a play so many acts in that our curtain is falling. Panic is other people. My fear isn't dying, it's that whatever life isn't much in a universe that goes on undefinable. The mechanism fires until it does not. Heart rate increases until it stops. Tree or wall or river is to car. The moments of urgency. The heart beats until it's stopped. A panic overtakes, seizes up, pressure chokes, veins constrict, shred, blood flow restricted, is more force, destruction arriving, preconfigured in a history of crises. When working correctly, the stress subsides, pressure equalizes. A slight panic is the first rupture. But if crisis never stops, but if crisis never resolves itself, but if crisis is all there are no resolutions, only more crises coming. Sometimes things are born in fire, are of the ashes. To obsess over time is a fetish, to whisper into it another. The future is a fetish that oppresses, and when there is no future, the present oppresses instead. When the present oppresses, the past is idealized, its entries into memory a fetish. I am tickled by memory, as the past cannot see what is not there, the absence of the specter of the future. I am being buried alive. I didn't know that we die in pieces. The body revolts against its housing, the science of my lenses and nails. In my sexual fantasies, I'm a capitalist. A desire to be interred in chalk in a math of revolutions, another reason to remain abjure artifacts. The reasons for being quiet diminish us. The future is oppressive in two ways: when there is no future and when the future is overwhelmingly certain, if parallax or intangible. Whatever hides beyond crisis is crisis and panic, a panic which will not stop until the moment lapses, until what is beyond the future becomes acknowledged. The leaves are falling, but I am not afraid because I know they will not cover me. There will be no discovery or recovery. Everything about everyone else is about me too. I cannot believe the world exists when I close my eyes or when I leave a room. By being in my sight, you are indentured because I can't unsee. I speak below a whisper until my voice is heard. My toes curl at the thought of the world going on without me, so I make sure it won't. The marks across an expressionless face, eyes that search for a remnant thread, being is trying to avoid all the reasons for undoing the stitches that tie the tarp down and keep it from drowning everyone else who just wanted to stay dry. Future Panic's in 5 sort of biggish sections, and that was from section 4, and this is section 5. At night, we lay dying, imagining all the panics of death, breath slowing, stopping, arms falling slack, cold. This panic floods continuously, the delta of an avulsing river that drowns every town in its path. Whatever river persists, flows not for itself, but to grow new life in the flood. And at night, we imagine the world as it is without us, something which sustains for the next permutation. There is a future that is not for me and a present that goes right up to it. The ways in which death becomes idealized. The end of pain, the end of suffering, the sweetness of an afterlife or of nothingness or of peace or of home or of safety or of being reunited or of renunciation or of the end of time, the end or of time, the end of or diaspora of time, the diaspora or colonization or of by time. And at night we lay dying, the real beyond the fantasy constructed. I escape into dreams of an ideal life, extant without the parallax of day to obfuscate. A perfect version of being that is only limited by what we fail to imagine. There are no ethics in a fantasy space, no construction beyond the structures which we can't see around. My secret is that I know I would not say no. I rub the blade across my lips because I know I would not say no. The abyss seduces terror, desire unfulfilled. Sometimes you have to stand in the center of the flood so no one else drowns. So at night, we envision a death of the present stream and flood it with a new, ideal river of fantasy constructed of remnant threads. Old wounds are cauterized, they heal in the realm of the fantasy, all destruction sealed into the mise-en-scène of a life that only exists in the liminality of sleep. My secret is knowing that to blow the windows of my life out by throwing a grenade into the middle of the house would be easy. The revolution is always easy. It's the new status quo that's impossible to predict. The blade touches the tongue and all the ways to escape into the world are no longer obscured. What seduces is not the promise of a new life, but the destruction of the old, a dying house demolished for a new development. The fantasy life is not one of future abundance, but one missing the scaffolding of the present. My secret is that the boredom to preserve is greater than the desire to destroy. The grenade's pin seduces. I wrap my finger through the loop and know how to pull. Instead, I leave damaged the one thing I can. Wake into the same fantasy fallen asleep in, deeper reflection of panic submerged in diegetic spaces. The flood returns. There is only chaos in this water. The flood cannot wash away everything. I don't believe in God, but I do believe in sin. The flood does not carry forgiveness in its waters. Without a God, there is no forgiveness. Water's patterns and physics are like time, the schema for all matter in the universe. The greatest gift is not time. It's escaping from it. It's time ceasing and holding the breath back, the heart in the middle of a beat. I want you always just at the tip of my fingers at the furthest. I stopped breathing so my lungs stay in focus. I am alive in a yes, an utterance that cuts, a provocateur, leading myself into the deepest water, the ground a blur to all who cannot be, the only ones to drown. I've lost all sense of time, so you're just gonna have to bear with me. A couple of new poems. The first time I was driving to Fayetteville, Arkansas, to read, I stopped by Jordan's place, and I hope Jordan doesn't get too mad, but Jordan said, watch out for that Matt Henriksen fellow. He's an odd one, and he is an odd one. But this poem is for Matt, and it was in the Brooklyn Rail recently. It's called Green Boots. Along our arms we mark time, mark the hours and seconds as flesh trusses slow the body, withholds, keeps us together from flooding out into ether. Let's pray there was a bolt of lightning and no moment of sadness or grief or awareness. Along the trail, we know now to tip a cap or ring a bell or holler. Or maybe making everyone laugh disrupts the unrestrained division of cells, our bodies fighting to hold on longer before bursting, pressure equalizing between us and the universe we sieve into. This one's called Wonderful Land, and is taken from an instrumental song that I can't remember the band who recorded it, but that's fine. In movies, the hero always smiles before they die. A wide vista opens, spreads out, a lover, the road unimagined, I realize. In a requiem of hours, the tempo slows, slightly to create the proper mood, the dirge sense of demise looming, like a sleepless night, pressure fit into the walls of the canyon by a flooding river. Another world is not hard to see while your sins are thick in veins, or how to choke on your ghosts is the modern approach to a science not yet dead. I drew a heart across the ground where I wanted everything to grow and seeded the field so we might talk of it to it. I'm going to read one last poem. It's called Manifesto. Seems good to end with a statement of some kind. Maybe it's the job of a poet once in a great while to draw a red line around the flesh that's rotting, to identify the tears in the canvas that need patching to appear fresh again. Maybe what a poem can do is wink its way into the arteries leading to the heart of a thing, to cause the rupture that no one ever hears until the train's roar has quieted outside. Maybe a poem stops being a poem once the body builds its white blood cells around its acceptance. Maybe a poem ought to fight the organs of the body until either collapses. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Amish. That was great. Why is this on my screen right now? I don't want this on my screen. I'm just going to say later. Why not? Just say later to things. That usually works. Thank you, Amish. That was wonderful. Our second reader, I first heard Gion read their work. It was at the New Orleans Poetry Festival. It was one of the offsite reading. What was that, 2018, 2019, something pre-pandemic around those times?
Yeah, that probably is right. Yeah.
I can't remember when it was. But it was in a bar, like a lot of these offsite readings are. But anyway, your work was so mesmerizing and bold and arresting. And I just remember thinking, man, and I think I talked to Mike Young after that. I was like, wow, that was something. And now y'all are together and all that. I mean, that's just, so I don't know if it was your poetry, if it happened before. I don't know the timeline of any of that, but anyway. Gion Davis is a trans poet from Espanola, New Mexico, where they grew up on a sheep ranch. Their poetry has been featured in Wax 9 Journal, Protean Magazine, Had, and others, and their debut collection, Too Much, was selected by Chen Chen for the 2021 Ghost Peach Press Prize. Gion can be found on Instagram at Stark State of Mind, and on Twitter at Ghee on Toast, like ghee, Ghee. So please welcome Gion.
Thank you. That's so funny. I was gonna read this first poem that I'm gonna read is new, and it's about driving to Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I also met Matt at that same reading in New Orleans back in, I think it was 2019 or something like that. But yeah, I was going to read this first poem mostly because it's the only poem I have that has Kansas in it. And obviously, I mean, I guess y'all are probably in Missouri technically, but yeah, I'm going to read some new poems because I want to, and then I'm going to read some poems out of my book. And this first one is called Every Significant Thing I've Ever Done. Did you feel it though, when the backs of your teeth were numb and sparkling, when Paul Simon sang we all shall be received in Graceland, when the river clouds grazed the land like the cows in Kansas, the gas station toothbrushes, liquor store baseball caps, blown out railroad bridges, blackbirds murmurating over the semis, the burning bottomland, the dives with no dancing. You were told no matter what, make sure whoever is stuffing your parachute isn't wasted. The man in the captain's hat holding the rim of a trash can with both hands like he was steering the ship of Memphis. The devil in the red dress and wire-framed glasses getting into her Uber outside the bar. The blue rooms where we held each other. Snow geese over Atlanta at night like a lot of loosed gossamer. I woke up crying. You woke up screaming. Both of us reticently ripped into our lives. Two beachfront promises at the edge of an evaporating reservoir. It's so hard to want everything. I don't know if I ever will again. These new poems are sort of from this new project I have that's about being outside of everything. And this next poem is called Sex, Blood, Pizza, because of, I don't know, just the way that things are sanitized lately online in the name of safety or something, when it really just means like dulling everything, you know? But anyway, this is called Sex, Blood, Pizza. 2 of my friends are in the hospital today, one with COVID, one with head injuries from being attacked because she's trans. Maybe that is a bad place to start. No country is worth dying for, but when I imagine leaving mine, it's like turning my back on my own coffin. In another life, I could have been a guy in a band, but I'm a guy with a pussy, so I have to be complicated instead. I only know I was born because I was told. I only know I'm American because of how I was born. I only know you're sad because you're pretending to have fun. You're like a fire, making your own weather. I am a trash bag full of gasoline in the trunk of your car. When I opened up your heart, I found it bookmarked with a printed out recipe for tortellini soup. When I remember the old life, it's the way bubblegum remembers an extinct banana, raw chemicals where meaning used to be. Tamales for breakfast on a church lawn, swamp cooler smell with rhubarb syrup, mushrooms kicked apart on the sidewalk, your naked ass in the morning, us faithfully fucking, wearing sandals wherever I wanted without being worried I'd have to run for it. I don't know how it happened, but when some guy stuck a needle between my eyes, the only thing I could think was, I am not afraid of pain anymore. And I'm just going to read one more new one that I wrote after I got back from being on this book tour I was on in September and October. And it's called The Most Punk Thing You Can't Remember. I dreamed I was never so lonely, retreading the years where I have never been, my life saved by a peach snow cone the color of roses and sitting on the sidewalk outside the 76 eating fried chicken. From here, I can see where the fire jumped the highway and kept going. I was so angry I couldn't remember anything about Asheville. My memory is thin as glass for what I used to be. I had never once given up on love before it gave up on me. I'm not the type to cut and run. Someone tells me men's jeans have deep pockets, and I say, I know, I'm wearing them too. Where do you go when you're a loser with bleached hair? The next time we're in Sandusky, Ohio, you'll get us the jacuzzi suite, and the next time I wake up in New Jersey, I'll make sure you're never hungry again. When it comes down to it, do you mourn the people who will be lost, or do you feel anxiety for the art that will no longer have anyone to look at it? Who will read my poems when everyone is dead? I dream again of the woman I was. I see her across the room more clearly than I have ever seen myself awake, and she looks really good, and there was never anything wrong with her, but she couldn't stay. Where can I stay? The unpruned orchards out by Buffalo, the trees twisted as silver hands or squids in a tray, heavy with years of fruit. The blackbirds streaming like columns of smoke into the last hour of sun. The green glass insulators gleaming on telephone poles. The veal kennels backlit on the hills with little steers silhouetted inside them, doing all they will ever do, which is sitting down or standing up. Where is there to go? Do you feel this slow shattering everywhere too? The high horse feather clouds and all our hearts wobble like a few windows left in a burned out house. Okay, I'm gonna read out of this book now. This is my book. It's called Too Much. I'm just going to read a couple. I'm going to try to keep it on the shorter side so we can hear Sommer. Let's see. There's water you can die in. Trash on the train tracks. Steph finds a remote controlled vibrator, a cheap one, vibrating egg on a wire. She tries to touch us with it. We scream. Ryan trips into the ditch and comes up with a stray hypodermic needle speared through his flip-flop and out the top of his big toenail. We stop laughing until he jokes about probably having AIDS already anyway. A year later, jacking someone off in a sleeping bag in a tent in the Adirondacks, It doesn't matter who. The loneliest thing about being Narcissus is reaching for yourself in everyone, in black water, in a canoe drifting past bog gardens, orchids, and sundew fly traps. Suddenly everyone has a dead dad. Deer skull in the woods, cancerous antlers strapped to my back, hauling myself through someone's caramel apple vape cloud outside the Tesco station, thinking about the great sad poems I'll write when I have a dead dad too. I love fetishizing my own mistreatment, don't I? Velvet scrunchies littering my floor like a bunch of puckered buttholes. I get used to reaching across the bed and only touching myself. I realized that I read 2 poems like in a row that had gas stations in them. So that's where I'm at today, I guess, at the gas station. I live in Denver, and this is a poem about being in Denver, sort of. It's called You Might Have to Write It Nicer Than Real Life. I find myself strolling past my own ghost, and I keep my eyes down and walk through her as though she isn't the most important person in the world. Who is trying to be the most important person in the world? A stranger beside me, cruising up Colfax, sniffling about Rick Ocasek's death and talking about my sadness as if it's a big animal that should stay outside. Someone who says the worst pain he's ever been in was waking up with a sore neck 2 days ago, and saying I love you is like stuffing endless chocolate chip pancakes into a screaming mouth, along with freeways and cities and people and front yards full of dahlias and cherry tomatoes and rented roller skates and jacket pocket candies and plastic golden buttons. And I feel my mind leave my body and come back again in a bed uptown. I have stopped being angry, and now I am tired. It might be more poetic to say an octopus dreams about an ocean with no plastic in it, but the reality is she's dreaming about catching crabs with her magic camouflage. You can't dream about what you don't know. You can't invent a face you've never seen. Everything comes in threes, including days. A home improvement magazine hits the deck. A Labradoodle eats fries out of its owner's mouth. Nick Cage's stupid shirt in Raising Arizona. There's a fire on the mountain, and in the dark, in the car, I can see trees crowning brighter than stars, and love is standing behind someone forever, and the moon is another place I'll never go. What else? I'm going to read this poem that I started reading on tour, and I'd never really read it out loud. I feel like everybody has poems that they feel like are their redheaded stepchildren or something that end up in books. And this was one of them. And then I started reading it on tour, and I was like, hey, this is a pretty good poem. It's called Your Sad Butt in Jeans. We talked about the weather. It used to be different last year in childhood. The vortex, the hurricane, winter stalking the skyline, every dark copse and empty intersection, the burning green eyes of traffic lights blinking above cones of fog in Connecticut, the way you looked half asleep putting your coat on over your long hair, and my panicked bus ticket, as if bad news can't touch me in the city, but you can. You know exactly where my pancakes are buttered. The waitress with gold wings on her sweatshirt said, I'm sorry, I'm a waitress now. I'm only going to be a waitress as long as I'm a waitress. I'm only going to live as long as I live. Red end of a pool cue, cigarette cherry, sitting in the back in a mood like you're ready to leave September. Cold catalytic converter smell, kerosene on wet birch, the knobs of your ankles in pedal pusher pants, heirloom tomatoes, our twisted hearts. You, my poetry girlfriend, your sad butt in jeans when you walked outside to smoke after I pissed you off while we were dancing. I was afraid I'd never see you again, and then I never saw you again. I'm going to read just maybe just 2 or 3 more short ones. This one is called Soft Obsessions. Obsidian chips in a dish on the dresser, burnt my finger between the pot and the kettle. I retain the right to observe anniversaries of things that no one else cares about. Pictures of us looking very Y2K, kissing a stranger in a living room full of strangers, and now I know them all. Sitting awake at the kitchen table in the dark, imagining disappearing to start over. There's someone in my bed again whose feelings seem realer than mine. Will I ever be the kind of person who doesn't look at the horizon mid-conversation, the mountains bruising blue in the dusk in Colorado, the thin green line between the sky and ground towards Las Cruces, the holes in my memory shrink-wrapped by time and loss? It's about avoidance, so this morning, please confront me. Okay, let's see. At night, I imagine the coyotes laughing together on the swing sets at the empty school up the road. The city is finally theirs. I'd laugh too if it was me. Who was I? My star chart says I was born to be an employee when I always felt I should be a planet myself, trudging through the universe as a gigantic, lonely eyeball. Leave it to heaven to tell me how I should exist on the ladder, as though it wouldn't be more cost-effective for me to drop dead, abandoning the pizzas I'd pick up with all the boyfriends I'd have, the tattoos and birthdays and paying for water. What is it like to be an unstructured animal, as innocent as Jupiter and twice as beautiful? I think I'm just going to read one more. This last poem is called The Leash. A man is chasing a big white pit bull down the middle of the street, and when he catches up, the dog goes down on the yellow lines, apologetic. I'm going home. Boiled saffron like a bloody eye, shopping carts shuffling through a parking lot in a shaky breath. I collapse under the weight of my capacity to love people. Knowing a person has arrived by their laundry smell, the blue eyes of innocence in country songs, snare drum like a sharp heart in tomorrow's olives, a waitress pouring ice out on the curb, Annie dancing. Is there anything more romantic than imagining yourself the way others see you? I am home and you are here again, reality tilting on its axis, lying on the precipice of change under the blankets, watching a movie about the world ending in 1999. I get told to be strong and realize how weak I am in the land of crumpled mountains and statues of famous missiles, ignoring each other like parentheses at either end of a sentence. It's really something to be somebody's, to be held down to a bed, a mouth, a feeling, the performative chase and inevitable catching. I'm not saying I'm like a dog running away. I'm going home. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Jordan, for hosting and everything.
Thank you so much, Gion. And I apologize for soft Gene your name. I always want to soft G your name. Thank you, Gion. That I don't know. Your poems. I feel like, and I know I'll ask you this maybe in my questions, but how many of them were actually written on road trips? But I always feel like that you take me on this like carbon neutral road trip or so. Like it's like, oh, I just went on this incredible road trip and I didn't kill the environment doing so. So anyway. That was really fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, so our final reader tonight read for the series back in I think 2013 or 2012 or something like that, when everything was so different. I think Georgia was an infant at the time, and I remember right after reading, I think y'all had to go right back to the hotel, and I don't know it. But anyway, Sommer Browning is how to explain Sommer Browning, is someone who bowls me over, I think is the way to do it, where Sommer can go from being incredibly hilarious to incredibly moving, astute, and use all these different forms that move from comedy just being a human being who's in touch with other human beings, or aware of what we're not aware of oftentimes. So anyway, I'm just thrilled that you're here today, and I loved your last book. I read it on the way home from AWP. So Sommer Browning is a poet, a writer, a curator, and an artist. Her latest book is Good Actors. Came out in 2022. She's the author of 2 other collections of poetry, Backup Singers and Either Way I'm Celebrating, as well as the artist book, the Circle book, and the joke book, You're on My Period. In 2017, she founded Georgia, an art space in her garage in Denver. Her poetry, her art writing, and visual art have appeared in Lit Hub, Bomb, Jubilat, Chicago Review, Entropy, the American Poetry Review, and elsewhere. She's a librarian, and she's sitting outside a comedy club right now in, where is it? Not Tampa, is it? I want to say
Tampa. It's
Tampa?
Tampa.
Okay. All right. Outside of Tampa, please welcome Sommer.
Oh, thanks, Jordan. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? All right. It is a pleasure to read with Gion and Amish. I love your work, both of you. It's exactly the right poetry for me. Thank you. Good to hear you. And thank you, Moms Mabley. And thank you, Moms Mabley, and thank you, Phyllis Diller. And thank you, Moms Mabley, who ran away at 14 to join a vaudeville troupe, and Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers. Thank you, Moms Mabley and Phyllis Diller, who started doing stand-up at 37, and Joan Rivers and Carol Burnett. Thank you, Moms Mabley, who came out at 27 in 1921, and Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers, who kept a note from Lenny Bruce that said, "They're wrong, you're right," in her bra for years, and Carol Burnett. Thank you, Moms Mabley, who came out at 27 in 1921, and Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers, who bombed every night for 2 years, and Carol Burnett, who said, "There's laughter in everything." Thank you, Moms Mabley and Phyllis Diller, who started doing stand-up at 37, and Joan Rivers and Carol Burnett, who said, "There's laughter in everything," and B. Arthur. Thank you, Moms Mabley and Phyllis Diller, who started doing stand-up at 37, and Joan Rivers, who claims she was the first female host of The Tonight Show, but so does Della Reese and Flora Henderson and Phyllis Newman, and who really cares anyway, and Carol Burnett and B. Arthur, whose TV character Maud chose to get an abortion at age 47 in 1972. Thank you, Moms Mabley, who gave birth to 6 people, and Phyllis Diller, who gave birth to 5 people, and Joan Rivers, who gave birth to 1 people, and Carol Burnett, who gave birth to 3 people, and B. Arthur, who mothered 2 people. Thank you. Oral history. I can't even tell you what happened today. I put on a Yes record. In fact, I think it was the Yes album. It's still playing. Of course, there was a lot of suffering today. Whitney's, Phillips, Kay's. I sat on the porch and remembered being 41 and sneaking out of the house into an amateur porn actor's van. You know those vans? And giving him the longest hand job in the world. He looked at me like I was his mother. I insisted he call me Professor. I'm proud of it, really, because I make a lot of friends laugh when I recount the story. My arm ached for days, I say. Boy, Sommer, that's funny. Sure, some of them feel weird listening to it, but that's because they secretly dropped out of poetry school. Historicity. Best ending to this story, Ben, is for me to finish the movie. Best ending to this story, Ben, is the thud of the script hitting your front porch when I deliver it to you. The drama of that thud, like the tomb closing, Ben, on Jesus, Ben, Jesus Christ, Ben, a few days before he comes back, Ben. How Jesus came crawling back, Ben, asking his apostles for forgiveness, Ben, for calling them addicts, Ben, for telling them how great they were, what good mothers they were, Ben, how their careers were really gaining momentum, Ben, for telling them they were his forever people, Ben, then calling them sociopaths, Ben. Forgiveness for that. Best ending to this story, Ben, is our movie winning that prize, Ben, and me telling you and you having to say thanks. Thanks for supplying the perfect ending to our story, Sommer, Ben. That's the best way to end this story and make the stars come all over the galaxy, Ben, all over every dead planet, Ben, watch cum streak through the atmosphere of some planet, Ben, watch it burn off in blurs, Ben, watch one seed escape and land on that dry, rocky landscape, maybe Mars, Ben, maybe it melts, maybe it bursts, Ben, carbon, Ben, making stains all over the face of that planet, Ben, a seed, Ben, breaks open and releases a blueprint, Ben, that cute little tail sperm have, Ben, that potential energy, the stupid spark of which the planet's lone molecule of Mars water has been dreaming, Ben, that molecule looking up from its parched porch into the forever black at the blue, so blue, blue earth spinning and needy, Ben, listen. The water and the sperm fall in love. And Ben, that's how babies are made. The baby roots two into one, Ben. It clutches the desiccated earth, but Mars, Ben, and wheezes itself into a cacophonous, impossible storm of scabs. It wheezes life, it says life, Ben. Ben, it murmurs mercy, it says mercy, Ben. Ben, it says we, Ben. Ben, it screams we. I'm in this car and no one cracked the window. It's very hot in here. I think I'll be okay. But if not, it's side splitters in Tampa. So you can call 911 to hear. This one's called Super Bowl. I knew today would be special, but not eating wings alone in an Asian fusion restaurant special. This is my new book, Good Actors. The nice people at Birds LLC. Oh, thanks, Jordan. I dare someone to prank call that place. Be like, there's a poet in the car, in a rented car, in your parking lot. She needs a beer. Single mom. Gion, funny. I want to make the mistakes famous people make. Divorcing in underpants, lighting a crack cigarette, getting fat. I want to make these mistakes so well that I'm offered a part in the movie of the story of my life by Lynn Hegenian. There's actually two versions of this book, and I have the worst one. They're both worse, but this one's worst. And it doesn't have the one poem. Something happened to the cover, and so they were like, oh, the cover's all wrong, the wrong color, so we get a reprint for free. And I was like, well, then can I edit everything? So I traded out a few poems. I was very lucky to do that. I think it made it maybe like 0.5% better. Life a draft. Fuck traffic. Fuck cars. Fuck steak. Fuck Wendy's. Fuck a foam soap. Fuck media. Have you seen the moon tonight? It fucking sucks. Fuck texting. Fuck us. Fuck no worries. Fuck waiting in line. How hard is it to fucking reply all? Fuck diets. Fuck electricity. Fuck sex. Fuck higher education. Fuck air travel. Often I'm permitted to return to a meadow and I don't know what the fuck to do when I get there. Fuck cinema. Fuck bottled water. Fuck this. Fuck that. Time's all like, fuck you. Why did the porn star get fired? She didn't give a fuck. Fuck jokes. Fuck television. What a fucking piece of work is a man. I'll read two more. Thank you. Good actors. I want to make a movie before I turn 45. 46 now. Actually 47. Shit, I'm 46. How about about two characters exchanging money? I give them directions. I say to them earnestly. As if holding grilled cheeses, they push the money into each other's hands. I call out, reluctantly. They look down and say, God damn it, this is the last time, Ray, and weave it between their fingers. They're good actors, so I say, hopefully. They blink and gaze into their hands like into a new baby. Angrily, I say, they gnaw the money to confetti. I tell them as if in mourning, and the money fevers down their wrists. And now, like a bank, they fist and throw it like garbage. And a forest, now a forest. Like seed, they sow it. You're doing very well, I say. They drop it at my feet. Exuberantly, I say, they remove their clothing. Lovingly, I say, they move toward me. They are such good actors. They turn off the camera. The first number will be a blues. I like so much driving as fast as the car can go on a highway in the country, 120 say. It's best if there's a person with you, someone you're dating, maybe you love, someone more scared than you are to see you free. Have you done it in your 40s? You should do it in your 40s. And if you're too frightened, what you need to do first is go fuck yourself. Then you'll be able to do it. In 1955, before his band begins to play the blues walk, the band leader Donald Byrd says, the first number will be a blues. Don't you love that surety? We'll be a blues. Not, I think we'll play a blues. Not, how about a blues? But the first number will be a blues. And hell if it isn't. The thing about public land is it's not mine and it's not yours. It's this third uncomfortable thing, ours. And things that are ours abide rules we learn through others. Yours and mine rules are boring. We're born with them. The first number is 1, and it will be a blues. You don't have to tell me twice. The pain I see in my child is my mother's, and I'm the bridge. Another poet might tell you about all the research she's done on Donald Byrd. She'd wedge Byrd's life in here as allegory or something worse, metaphor. Before we're born, my mother tells us, we watch movies of every life we could be born into. Then we choose. The little baby points from her astral cradle. That one, I choose that mama. I choose that daddy. I choose that irrevocably broken marriage, that accident that wires my jaw shut, that burned popcorn, that daughter late in life named Georgia, that root canal, that unending night on mushrooms, that dog bite, that last beer with Orin, that A+, that DUI, that refrigerator stinking of rotten eggs because I don't have enough for the electric bill. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to read with you. Thanks.
Oh, Sommer, that was great. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am going to bring the other readers. I'm going to add you all into the spotlight here. And I didn't see any questions in the chat, but I did have one. And it was something that came from a line from your poem, Amish, which was, and if I misquoted, I apologize, but a poem can wink its way into the arteries, I think I got that right. I don't know. Let's just go with it and say, so my question is for all of you, how do you know when something you've written, when a poem or anything really, well, let's just stay with poems. How do you know when a poem is winking its way into your arteries? How do you know if it's happened? How do you know if it's happening? Has this changed from when you first started writing poems to the poems you write now? How do you know when that thing is happening? And yeah, I'll just stop right there. And you can always just say, I don't want to answer that question next, if but that's the only question I really have right now. Anybody?
I feel like for me, I don't know. I mean, you said like when I was done with my reading that everything feels like a road trip, and I feel like that's true for me. And it also is like I feel like a poem starts to come together when I've like been able to triangulate like two or three, like I guess a triangle is three things, right? So it has to be three things. When you triangulate like three like really absurd things that I've seen happen or that have happened to me in like the world, and then it's like, oh, okay, well those things are like related to each other somehow, and then that's how that starts to like, and then I have to figure out how to put them together. But I think that's how it is for me. It's like collecting.
Yeah, I think that seems very familiar to me too. So maybe I think that too. But yeah, lots of things and happenings and things I see, things I overhear. I don't know, they just stick in my brain in a certain particular way that I'm like, that there's poetry in that thing that happened, that word play, that incident, that coincidence, that something. But yeah, and then they kind of coalesce in this way that makes sense, poetic sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think to the question of whether or not it's different from before to now, it feels in some ways like it's getting worse, like it's slipping away. Like the closer I get to some kind of like sense of like belonging or like that I'm doing something right, it's like no, this is actually getting worse. Like whatever is coming out is actually worse. To quote a comedian, we're not I guess we shouldn't quote, the poem isn't over when it's over when I hate myself. And I feel like that has always applied, and now I'm just like more aware of it, which is also worse.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Bob Hass quote or something like, it's hell not writing the poem, it's hell after you've written the poem, but in the middle of it, that's where something feels good somewhere. I don't know if that's wholly true, but a lot of times it's true. It's always like, oh, I don't want to do this, and then I'm like, oh, this is great, and at the end I'm like, oh God. I guess, and this leads me to another question, which is, has writing poetry changed the way that you speak to other people, or the way you speak to yourself, or the way that you yeah, do you think it's bled into you, into your language, into your dreams? I think I had a weird dream last night where I think I was dreaming in a poetic language, I think, and it was maddening. I couldn't fucking turn it off. But I'm wondering if that happens to you all, if you felt like writing poetry, reading poetry has done anything to your day-to-day communication with people or yourself.
I feel like it's become a hilarious excuse for getting out of things. Like it used to be like someone would be like, what do you do? And I'd be like, poet. And now it's like, I'm a poet, so don't expect anything from me. Like whatever you're getting here is as good as it's going to be. Like but no, I kind of agree. I mean, it's always like an odd space for other people, surely.
I
To have
think,
to
yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I think it's like I've written about this before, but in different ways and in poems. But I think that like being a poet makes you into such a like voyeur in some ways, because all you do is like, you don't do anything about anything. You just sit around and like wait for things to happen, and then you like write them down really covetously. And it's like very voyeuristic. And I think that like that tension to me of like being around people that I care about, or in situations that are like important to me. And I'm always like, there's some part of me in there that's like just constantly like mining it for like content, you know? And that I think like creates a canyon in like intimacy with other people or something, if that makes sense. But I've been thinking about that some recently. I wrote about that in like a different, in my chapbook, I think, that I read out of in New Orleans when I met you, Jordan. So, but yeah, that's my answer to that.
Yeah, that's the first thing I was gonna sort of leap to, is that it creates this kind of artifice or something, this like separation a little bit from me. Maybe it's a voyeuristic thing where I'm the watcher or something, but you know, it's just like a coping mechanism where it's like I need something to filter the world. And so I'm gonna choose language or choose the interesting poetic, you know, scaffolding around me or something, rather than maybe just diving in and engaging with the present. um, you know, among coping mechanisms, not the worst, but you know, maybe it's just, you know, I mean, the other thing, if we want to maybe put a more positive spin, would be like language is just, I think because I write poetry now, I can see how complicated language is and how much it changes our ideas, changes our values, um, plays into, you know, how we love people, how we form relationships, how we deal with politicians and politics, you know. So I just can kind of like dive in and see all these different layers of language all around me. Um, and that's super fascinating and interesting to me. And kind of that propels most of my life, is like, is it interesting? Is it neat? You know, if it feels good, if it feels bad, that seems secondary to me. Then is it a new thing? And is it like intellectually interesting?
Yeah, I think especially with your work, Sommer, it's like, does it amuse, you know, does it have some type of amusement to it? And I don't mean that just in the humor sense. There's a question in the chat from Anna. What happens when you all edit? Is it always good, or is it thin ice? Yeah, that's interesting. So when it comes to editing, how much editing do you do? What is that feeling that you get from editing? Are you cold and cruel when you edit? Is there another you that comes out that slaps the poem around, or are you gentle with your editing? How does that work?
I feel like editing is like most of the process for me. Are you cold and cruel? Matthias gets it. I think that editing, like, yeah, I think that's like the most satisfying part of the process for me in some ways, because it is like a puzzle or a math problem or something that feels like it's solvable, you know, where like mostly writing is like so amorphous and vague. And then once you get to a point where you can like edit, once you get to a point where you can edit, like you're at a point where you're fixing something, you're like putting a machine together instead of like, I don't know, figuring out how you feel, you know. I guess that's cold. Is that cold? Is that a cold thing to say about editing? But yeah, I guess I find editing to be like most of it for me, I guess.
Yeah, I love editing. I love revising. That's where the poem really comes alive for me. I love it. It's like pleasurable. I'd much rather sit down and edit something than think of something new. That's hard.
Yeah, that's a really great way of saying it, you know.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, that like it's almost like sobering up. Like suddenly you're like aware of all the horror. Like you think back through all the horrible things you said and like did, and you're like, oh my God, did I embarrass myself? Like, did I like make a comment that I shouldn't have made? You know, all those things. And they're like, oh wait, no, I can go back and edit. I can go back and like sit down and say like, here's all the places that I need fixing. And I think there was a like the cold part of it sometimes is like, oh wait, no, this never worked. Like that sometimes comes out of the editing process, right? Where you sometimes have to say like, wow, this was actually terrible the entire time. And I'm glad that I came back to it so I can throw it away. And then on occasion you find the happy moment where you're like, oh wow, this was actually kind of interesting. Like this worked out okay. But yeah, editing is much more joyful process than creating, certainly.
Anna in the chat says sometimes it seems like one can lose something. And I think that is like, I think that is like a hang up in editing. But at the same time, like I don't ever throw anything away when I edit. I just like take it out of the document and like put it in a different place. And then because it's like for something else, like if it doesn't work in that poem, like it's gonna come back. It always does, and there's like lines I've had that have just been sitting in like my notes app for years, probably, that I will like return to and be like, oh my God, it's like, this is going to fix this poem that I wrote yesterday, So don't throw anything away, I guess. I don't think you lose anything.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, always save it. You'll find a way to use that old tinfoil. Question, Bradley had a question for you all. Do you all have a target audience in mind when you're writing? Does it change from poem to poem? I know sometimes, if I'm writing something, it feels like it's too one directional to one person. I'll call them or I'll text them. Then I'm like, oh, I'm not writing a poem here. If it's too kind of, in that line to one other person. But do you all have an audience? Does it shift? Do you have just one person? I don't know. How does that work for you all when it comes to your target audience?
I keep answering the questions first. So I'm sorry. I do actually have like a pretty strong answer for this one. And I feel like I think about this a lot. And I don't know, like a target is like really the right thing, but I feel like my poems really connect with people who aren't poets. I think there are a lot of poets out there who write poems that are just for poets, and that's great. And I also try really hard not to be one of those poets. And because I really love to do readings and have people come up to me and say like, I hate poetry, or I've never read poetry, but your poetry is like really good and I really liked it and now I want to go read more. And I feel like those people are like my target audience mostly. And I feel pretty strongly about that.
That resonates with me for sure. I mean, just maybe Friday at this art opening, this filmmaker, Laura, was like, I hate poetry, but I like whatever that thing you do. And I was like, well, just don't call it poetry and keep liking it. Yeah. If you think about your audience too much, I think it can hem you in and distract you.
Absolutely.
For me.
Yeah. I feel like I spent so much of the early days trying to please like a certain set of people that I was hoping would like whatever I was doing. And then the realization like, well, that's never going to happen. So it's like, you may as well just do it. I think there was the comment, it's like, or are you the audience? It's like, yeah, if I don't like it, it doesn't really matter to some extent. Like, it doesn't matter if anyone else enjoys it. Like, it doesn't matter to me, Yeah.
Can I ask you all one more question? Is that okay? And then I know, okay, let me ask you one more question. I see in the chat here about projects. I often feel myself trapped by projects when it comes to poetry, where I have trouble writing stuff that isn't fitting into that design for the book. Do any of you feel similarly? How do you escape a project? How do you escape, that cycle that you might get yourself into, that loop?
I think Gion had it, that it's like, don't throw anything away, just like set it aside for like the future thing. Stick to like the project you're working on as much as you can. And then like if something doesn't fit, then set it aside and come back to it. And if you don't come back to it, that's fine too. Like, you
I
know,
also, yeah, I agree with that. And I also think that the idea of a project for like a poetry book, assuming that this is what the question is about, is like a trendy trap. Because I think there are a lot of books right now that are like project books of poetry where it's like a theme or like a whatever, like, you know, and I think those books have merit in their own way. But I also think that like, I think everything you do in like a window of time is like a project, you know. I think that I don't know. I mean, the book that I have, I wrote over like a 5-year period. And I like initially was like, I don't know how these poems like fit together. And then once you like sit down and like put them together, you can see the way that the threads like start to move together, you know. And I think that like it can be a collection. It doesn't have to be a project with like a thesis statement, you know. It's poems. That's not really how it works. And I think that people getting published right now there's like a lot of those because they're like, you know, I think that's how we understand narrative in our minds, you know, with everything else, with all the other things that are structured around narrative, but poetry doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I've noticed that too. I remember, you know, books in the 70s where it'd just be a 50 poems. And I didn't really feel like, you know, it's like, these are poems. You turn the page, it'd be a different poem. But I feel like that, yeah, a lot of books now, they have to have this like thematic, you know, arcing, cohesive unit. And you're right. I think that's both of what you said is, I think, really important. Also, I think writing poems while you're writing something that is thematic is always good. Just keep writing other things. Step away from that thing would be my advice too. Summer, what are your thoughts?
I mean, the only thing I was thinking of is like, it's okay to feel trapped. I mean, tell me how you could not feel trapped, period, ever. So
I also think
not
that
helpful.
poems, oh, sorry, what, Summer?
I was like, that's not helpful. So please, say
I
something.
think that's helpful. I think that's helpful. I was just going to say, I think that it's also like hard to be objective when you're writing a bunch of things at once, but it's always going to be you know, and you have your own voice and it's going to sound like you almost no matter what. And like that, I think can be a thread that goes through things, even if they feel disconnected.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to thank you all for your phenomenal reading. I've looked forward to this for months since it's been on the books. You're trapped in the car. Are you okay? You need water? We'll get you back to the club here in 1 second, Summer. Either the club or the pho and a what is it, a churro?
Churro.
Churro.
Yeah.
Churro.
you're gonna have to report back on how that is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, leave a
I will.
Yelp review, please. Anyway, thank you so much for everyone for coming again. This whole enterprise will shut down for a month, and then Kansas City, folks, if you're around, please come and check out our dynamite creative writing double majors. And then I'll start saying some things about the readings in February, March, and April. But if you're interested, you can always find me on the website or Instagram. Just I think it's Jay Stemps or something because Stempleman's too long, or Facebook, where you can find me. Anyway, thank you to our readers. You all were just wonderful. I love these early afternoon readings because then I'm all jazzed up and dinner's always better. So dinner's always
Thank you
better.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, Jordan.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Take care. Have
Thank
a
you,
great
Summer.
rest of
Thank
your
you,
evening.
Gion.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.